Hi, my name is Jordan Marshall and I'm Special Projects Editor at Building. I'm really delighted to have the opportunity to welcome you to the Keynote interview of our digital building series today. So today's topic is asset management. How can construction get the most out of its buildings? I'm really delighted to be joined by Neil Thompson from Atkins, who's going to be having a chat with me for the next half hour about all things this topic. Just a few admin things from me to kick things off. This session and the other two sessions that we have today will be available on demand. We always get through that. A lot of people want to share it. People want to go back and check things out again. Yes, same link you've joined today, you'll be able to watch on demand within about an hour of each of the sessions wrapping up. So never fear if you want to check that you've got something right, you can go back and check again or share with a colleague, and it will still be free on demand for the next 12 months. Also, we'd love you to get involved across the day, including today. Any sessions, please feel free to shoot them through, and we'll try and cover off as many of your questions as we can as well. But also get involved on social media, use the hashtag Digital Building Series or DBS, and we'd love to hear from you. So cool. Thank you, Neil, for joining us. I'm really excited about kicking things off with this discussion. I think maybe the best place for us to start would be, would you mind introducing yourself a little bit for us, telling everyone where you're coming from on this sort of topic?
Sure. So I'm Neil Thompson, Director at Atkins. I'm part of the asset management team and I've got a couple of other hats. So I'm also the chair of the built environment at the IET and also an honorary associate professor at the UCL's Bartlett School of Sustainable Construction. And I guess where I'm coming from with this, so part of my role is, how do we go about making better decisions in the built environment? And when I say the built environment, it's not just the things that we build, but the services and the capabilities that wrap around that to make, might sound a bit grandiose, but make civilization happen. And those split into processes, there's technologies, and then there's the capabilities of the people, and how do we go about designing those experiences is my day job. And in terms of sectors, I do everything from things in defense and around strategic weapons all the way through to what we're doing in utilities, water, schools, hospitals, airports, government policy and what have you. And so yeah, involved with lots of different things.
Okay, so I guess, the big question is how do we go about getting the most out of our assets? And obviously that's a question that we'll break down and get into the more but as a big picture first look, what do you think is the one big thing that, people should be doing to make sure that assets are, being as efficient and productive as possible?
So I guess, it's one of these things, there's a million things, but I think the main one is around ensuring that we're trying to, there's lots of people involved in the process of the building, construction, operating of assets. And if we're not aligning the types of outcomes that we're trying to achieve, especially from an efficiency perspective, we will struggle to achieve them. So being completely clear about, well, what is it that we're trying to do in terms of improving the performance of an asset and communicating clearly what those are, so people can be clear about how they play their role in doing that. I think generally what's happened historically is that there'll be a policy or a plan that happens at sort of high level strategic business level, but it fails to transcend down to the people that actually have to make that happen. It's a bit of a cliche, but all the people that work at NASA know that they're trying to put people up into space, and they're trying to do that as quickly and as cheaply and as efficiently as possible. The role of people in the large supply chain of making infrastructure work, is it clear your role in how do you make this piece of infrastructure perform? Making sure those communication lines are clear.
Yeah, absolutely. And so in terms of those communication lines and that sort of thing, are there typical blockers, and are there ways that those can sort of be overcome to help this process done?
Yeah, my biggest bugbear is the methods that we use to implement technology have historically caused us issues, and it's because we've focused on we've got a tool and we're going to shoehorn it into a process. In terms of how we make that better is focusing on two key things. So one is, who are the end users of these things, and when I say end users, it's not about necessarily, for example, the passenger on a train. It's the train driver, it's the people that work within the operations. They're also key user interfaces that need to be part of the design as well. So it's not about handing an operator of a piece of infrastructure an iPad with a tool on it. It's actually analyzing and focusing what is their role, where is the value added of their role, and trying to remove the bureaucracy and all the things that they don't like about their job from that, and selecting the appropriate technology based upon that decision, not the other way around. And then the other is then, what are the benefits of doing that? So being clear about measuring the impact and the performance improvements in terms of the benefits. So if you track the people that actually add the value and the benefits you get from that, and focus on improving those over time, is key. Because, and sorry to repeat myself, but just applying technology for technology's sake, how many failed IT implementation programs have we had that have just been about, we're just gonna buy some new technology and you're going to use it. It's just not good enough. We have to change how that methodology to be user focused and benefit focused.
Absolutely. And so something you touched on in your introduction was, you work across a lot of different sectors. Do you sort of see these like overlying principles as being applicable, regardless of asset type, or are there certain specifics? I mean, obviously there's differences on the way things operate depending on the sort of asset, but are there sort of overarching principles that can be applied?
Well, yeah, I think a lot of it does have heavy overlap, and I think it's in the context of we're going to slow down the new things that we're going to build, especially from a UK perspective. We're a very mature economy, and what we call the fixed capital formation is going to slow down. So building new things, we're going to think about more about the increasing the performance of the aging infrastructure that we've already got. So the thing that's common across all these different asset classes is, and no matter how complex they are, is doing things whilst something's already operating and you're in flight, and intervening on that without having an impact on, if it's a manufacturing process, it's, you can't shut down the plant, do an intervention, start it up again. It's doing these things in flight. So it takes a specific set of requirements to tie those two things together, because a lot of innovation from a construction perspective is viewed as, we're going to go and build a new thing, we build new processes into that, and we hope that that knowledge transfers over into the next project, and it generally doesn't. Not very good at that knowledge management from project to project. But as these projects become more about intervening on an operating asset, you have to do things differently. You can't just go and turn things off and put new things in. It's about understanding that journey, understanding exactly what are the parameters of performance and the current performance, and that you don't have an impedance on that. And I guess it's an analogy here is a little bit like moving away from sort of the waterfall management of projects into this more agile space, and learning a lot from how software is developed and applying that in the infrastructure space. I mean, it doesn't directly apply. There's some tools and techniques that are useful in those types of paradigms, but it's not just a case of, oh, someone's invented a process here, we're going to go and apply it there. There is a configuration of that to be applied in this context.
Absolutely. And in terms of that, like, updating existing assets and infrastructure systems, how important is like accurate, and quality data capture and management in deciding those outcomes that you're trying to achieve? And how do you sort of go about that?
Yeah, so so for me, it splits into two main problems, and this is where a source of confusion is in the industry, is the difference between the management of data and information. So my ropey analogy for this is there's the briefcase and then the contents of the briefcase. So information management is how the briefcase gets handed around, and people open it up and use data for their purpose. But then the contents of that, you can have excellent information management, but if you open up your briefcase and find a banana and you're trying to make a decision, it's not that useful for you, right? So it's that whole data piece, and data management is the key piece that's missing, because we've got to make some fundamental decisions about what we're going to do about data, because a lot of data already exists in the built environment. It's very noisy and it's unstructured, and lots of effort has to be made to to husband that data into something that's usable. But we're at this inflection point of, well, do we look at the historical data that we have, or do we just work on collecting data that's from the here and now? How do we measure the things that we've got right now and feed that into a decision-making process? And we're at this sort of weird space in between. If we look at the operation of autonomous vehicles, for example, they don't necessarily worry too much about historical data. There's a data model that operates on top of scanning the environment they are in real time, and we have to mimic that technology in our decision process today, because it's, you know, there's a, you know, maybe a controversial view, but the collection of historical data, as you know, feeding it into statistics and machine learning, isn't actually that useful. It's about understanding where we are right now and the tools and techniques that we need to understand. And it's not, I don't want to use the word real time. People talk about the real time. It's not, real time isn't that useful either, because it's a very difficult thing to achieve. Sort of, there's more of this a right time element to it, and measuring where we are right now. I mean, the amount of road signs that national highways have had historically is of not that much interest to us. How many signs that they've got right now and the condition that they're in right now is more useful.
Yeah, absolutely. And so something that you touched on before, I think it was actually offline when you and I were having a chat, you were talking about the idea of the way that different infrastructure systems, like part of the whole efficiency and you know, productivity piece is how the different infrastructure systems, how we get them to interrelate better, like, and that sort of piece. And I found that really interesting.
Yeah. So you know, there's one thing to get your own house in order when you're running your own asset, and there's tons of value in doing that. But we've got this latent value of connecting with other assets. So if we look at the National Digital Twin Program, that was never about building this monolithic model of everything. It was about interconnecting things. If we think about Google for a moment, you know, people say about the value of data, but Google search, you know, they haven't collected all the data on the internet, put it somewhere and you find it there. They've indexed and connected information on the internet. I mean, before search engines, you would have had to have known the specific you know, the specific URL to type in to go to a website. You wouldn't be able to discover anything. So this is the same thing here. It's not about us. You know, if we see a piece of infrastructure as a single website, you know, you want to find the interconnections of different infrastructures, because as we know, there is a cascade. You know, if something goes wrong, there is a cascade of events that affect other people's infrastructures. So the climate demonstrator by the National Digital Twin Program, Credo, connects, and I might get this wrong, so apologies, connects, you know, BT, National Power Networks, and one of the water, because I think it's Anglian Water, and you know, the Met Office, and tying all that data together from a flood event perspective is really interesting, because you know, there's an example that I worked on creating the pathway to the information management framework was, I forget where the bridge is, but there was a bridge, and on that bridge was the internet infrastructure. I think there was a water pipe, and the bridge was washed away in a flood, but actually it was a key connection point from a transport and connecting two towns together, but there was infrastructure on that bridge that was broken as well, so the water and the infrastructure. And you know, how are you going to go about fixing that and what have you? It's a collaborative effort. Yeah, and the digital in this space is going to be a key part of sort of the governance of collaborative processes that happen at that level. And they're really key and critical, especially as we're trying to be resilient to unknown climate effects, for example. We don't, you know, we may be heading into the hottest summer ever. What does that mean for our interconnected infrastructure? How do we how can we simulate that to digitally rehearse to do something about it just to be prepared? And then there's also, as I was saying before, is that how quickly can we discover that there's an issue and do something about it?
One of the things that this does make me think is, you know, traditionally construction and built environment firms sort of have a reputation of not necessarily working together collaboratively so well. There's silos of information, people keeping to their own backyards. Do you think for this sort of to be implemented really well, there needs to be a more collaborative, open culture? And do you think that's starting to happen?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's what I refer to as a culture of integration. So it's integration from a decision-making perspective, and to be clear that we do need to be more open with sharing. And when I say open, people sort of think, oh, we're just going to publish all of our data from our critical national infrastructure on the internet. It doesn't quite mean that. Openness is a cultural thing in the sense of being clear about what is the data that you hold, its value, and how it connects to others is key. But in terms of why that's been difficult, I mean, let's cut people a break, really, because just the application of technology in running a complex asset is hard enough. Doing that in a way that interconnects you with other pieces of infrastructure is like a level above that. And technology has only really got to the point of being able to handle that. So we get this rep for being uninnovative and laggards and behind, but the internet itself has only really got to the point of us having rich media services. We can watch Netflix, we can communicate with each other as humans, and we have some connected devices like light bulbs, and you can get an internet connected kettle now if you want. So it's the internet's still at its early stages and it isn't quite up to what we need to do, because it is, these are industrial sectors that are very complicated. So actually, I think it's more of the technology is now getting to the point of maturity and the ability to scale to what we need to deal with some of the issues. So let's be easy on ourselves. We've done really well with the analog infrastructure that we put in place for managing what we do. Actually, it's more of it's not that we're behind. It's the fact that the technology has only been available over the past few years to actually give it a go, to start proving the values and minimal viable products around this space. So that's my view.
Absolutely. We've also had a comment come in about like the issues regarding financing and resourcing, getting this sort of thing in place. Is that something that you find to be a challenge?
Absolutely. I mean, we're in a bit of a weird space from a finance perspective, because in the broadest macroeconomic sense, there's lots of money sloshing around, and there's money to be invested in infrastructure, and it's absolutely critical. We've got climate resilience and aging infrastructure and what have you, and like the business case for investing in infrastructure is there at that level. But how that transcends into the investment that we need for the application of innovation is slightly different, and we don't have effective cultures and finance structures around enabling innovation in a way that sort of brings real enduring change. As I said previously, we're really good at we're going to apply a specific piece of technology onto a program or a particular project, and it's not very sticky. It doesn't really stick onto the next one, because we augment a new team. They've had their different experiences of technology, and we sort of have this sort of sawtooth shape to our improvement over time. I think with innovation going forward today, I think we're starting to open up this, not having massive long programs that cost millions of pounds. It's going down to that user centricness and the benefits. Where we've been really successful in what we do is that we, instead of trying to augment a massive program of business change, is to say, well, actually, in 6 months we can deliver on a program that's about £700,000 worth of benefit back to the client. Spend say £70,000 on getting shaping what that looks like for an implementation plan, and that 70 turns into 700, and it's getting these what work can you do over a shorter period of time is a key focus, because those business cases can be more tangible to those signing them off, because that's the key bit, is all the we have this money flowing into infrastructure investment at the highest level, but then when we get into the people that have the signing off of tasks at the hundreds of thousands to £1 million level, they need to be completely clear about what they're going to get from that investment, Gone are the days, I believe, of these massive tens of £1 million change programs from a technology perspective and into more, shorter releases of benefit.
Absolutely. Something else that you touched on earlier was like the idea of, some of the digital processes and stuff, and how, they're not necessarily applicable across everywhere. But we've had a couple of requests for examples of specific, projects where, like, obviously I understand we can't necessarily be like, it's this project with this client, because that's not how these things work.
Clients get unhappy quite quickly if you do it.
Example that could like provide some background context to some of these points.
Yeah, sure. So let's say in the water market, water treatment works type stuff. So in a water treatment works context, there's two dynamics. There is the capital investment to build new infrastructure to extend the capacity of a water treatment works, and aspects of some of these water treatment works plants were built in the 1800s. So how do you turn those into digital assets? And that's sort of the dynamic that we deal with there. So one is about how do you select certain parts of those plants to do interventions on. Don't do the whole plant, because you're building new things and you're trying to make aging infrastructure work at the same time. So make sure you split those, and you'd have slightly different processes for greenfield and slightly different processes for brownfield. And then for the context of that, what treatment works is then, sorry, hit my microphone, is then there's a particular system. So there's certain waste management systems that are part of that waste treatment works that we focus on in the existing infrastructure that's aging. So A is mapping out what that process is from a physical perspective. Or how do you find out how that operates from a digital perspective, and mapping that out is called digital pathway. And then you'll get to see these two things. There's like a physical roadmap, and then there's a digital roadmap, and then they have touch points. Now, the interesting point is then understanding at what point does a thing become a digital asset, and how it behaves is quite key, because some of it's aging. How do you get a thing that's, it's a pump, old BMS systems and SCADA systems, and how do you adjust those to, because they've all been retrofitted with technology like Frankenstein over time. So there's the management of that, and just the simple task of sitting down in a room with a whiteboard and saying, this is where we start, this is the end, and what happens in between is incredibly valuable. So we do that, and then within that you can start breaking that down into use cases, and who actually plays a role in adding value in those processes, and being clear about who that person is, because we want to try and remove the bureaucracy out of that as much as possible, the wasteful elements of the process, and being explicit about it, because then you can quantify the benefits. So map the physical process, map the digital pathway, split that up into the functions and the things that it's trying to do, who plays a role in those, and then you can be clear about, well, what are their time movements? For example, there's the work that we do in operating a major motorway. Even something as simple as analysing how long it takes to get the information into a dashboard. We can take that from taking a week or weeks into 90 seconds, and measuring how long it, because people think, oh, the output, a nice flashy dashboard, that's brilliant in Power BI. But there's tons of work that happens to make that happen. Generally, it's sort of a bit, it just sort of puts a veneer over this physical process that we use to ram different bits of data together. If you actually analyze that and draw that out as a as a pathway, you can be clear about, well, how can we get that two weeks process time down to 90 seconds is key as well. And the other bit on top of that is also what I call decision architecture. So on top of that power, people just seem to think, so I know this is a mirrored image. So if this is your Power BI dashboard, you've got all this digital stuff that happens up to the dashboard, and people think your job's done. That's just the start. All the value happens on the other side of that dashboard, the eyes looking at it, trying to make a decision. What is the architecture of that decision in terms of a business process is critical, because you might be missing out certain types of data, which go back to our interconnected infrastructure. the dashboard of the internet provider of the bridge that's just failed, all they may know is that the internet's not, there's a section of the town that isn't connecting to the internet where, what's just happened. So yeah, that it's and then getting into sort of the work that we do is, we don't just do stuff up to the dashboard. It's actually the business processes that those dashboards are making decisions are being really key. And you'll be surprised how many, the double handling of processes, and the waste of people doing the same job 4 times is quite prevalent in the work that we do.
No, absolutely. So I'm going to jump onto a different topic, same area obviously, but different topics. I'm keen to get as much from you in the last 5 minutes as I can. Something you touched on earlier was the idea of climate resilience, and obviously, if you look around the world, Australia, where I'm from recently, there's been all forms of natural disaster and extreme weather and that sort of thing. And you're saying we might be heading into the hotter summer here. How does this sort of asset planning and asset management sort of really help, given that we are all obviously going to be experiencing more extreme weather events regardless of location?
Well, I mean, so this is another, I know I've only got 4 minutes, so I won't get too much on my soapbox, but once we can turn our physical infrastructure into digital objects, we can do interesting things with digital objects. We can test them, we can play around with them in the digital space and not break it in the physical. So I think there's 2 broad concepts here. So there's the simulation, and then there's digital rehearsal. So simulation is around applying data models to the scenarios that we have to understand what are the possible outcomes of different permutations, and that's key. But the other side is the digital rehearsal piece. So it's almost like a training tool. It's how do you respond to that and use it to practice where things go wrong on what you do. And the same works in the construction context. So simulating the thermal comfort of a school and making sure that it's the CO2 levels aren't accumulating, all that stuff, versus the digital rehearsal of its assembly and construction are 2 separate things. So they're the 2 key things that we need to get into our culture around, because generally, because we're delivering something so complicated and the time's tight, we're only really given the time to get one go at doing this, and we're just rushing and firefighting our way to get to the outcome. We don't generally take that time to do simulations and digital rehearsals as part of our decision architecture to make sure that we're doing the right things, and that both works in the construction and the operational sense. So I think from a climate resilience perspective, it's one, we don't need to have historical data to understand the laws of physics are the same around the world. So extreme temperatures can be a synthetic data point. Let's simulate what happens. Let's not wait for temperature can go up or down, and we know and when open those envelopes up and see what they can do, and what have you. So it's that's sort of getting back into not relying too much on the historical data, because history is being made every day now. The precedent's set on our data set. So if it's the hottest it's ever going to be, understanding that it wasn't that hot 10 years ago probably isn't that useful to us right now.
No, absolutely. I'm very conscious we've got a minute left, so I was going to say to you, and thank you so much for being so generous with your time, but is there any big key takeaways that you would have for the audience listening in today? Is there any key, if you want them to walk away with one message, what would that be?
And I think it is back to our examples of the work we do and where we have our most success, and the successful ones do the 3 things. So 1, user centricity, go and quantify the benefits. Doesn't matter if you get it wrong, but you're giving yourself a target to track, and it's got a pounds and pence piece against it, so you can at least have a conversation about who has that benefit. Does it go back to the client? Do you share it? And you can adjust your incentive model of how that works. And the 3rd one's about sort of these digital pathways and decision architectures. They're like, map them. Just get people that make decisions about things in a room and map those out. Is so useful, because you get to learn about what everyone else is trying to do, and the latent benefit of getting people together in that way is is incredible. And then you're completely clear about what that process looks like and what things you are duplicating, what bits you can take out.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. That's 10 o'clock, and I've taken up all the time I have with you today. So I really appreciate your insight and your expertise. I had a really great chat and probably could have kept going for another half hour easily. Also, huge thanks to Atkins for making today's session possible. To our audience, thank you for joining in, and thank you for your comments that were sent through. Also, please feel free to check out the rest of the program for today. It's available on all three of our brands. That's Building, Building Design, and Housing Today. And you'll be able to find all the information about the rest of today's sessions there. So Neil, thank you again for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And goodbye.